Alright. So, I'm back. It's been a couple days since I did the last one of these, and the last one that I didn't even record. Or, well, didn't save the recording. So, I don't have it to post. Really hoping this one records. The last one that I did that didn't record, I read, I believe it was just chapter 8, verse 1 through 29. This talked about the fall of AI. Sorry, excuse me. Some of the key points that I highlighted, talked about how God told them to take only its spoil and its livestock you shall take as plunder for yourselves. So this one, God basically said, okay, this time, this one's for y'all. You don't have to give all the stuff to me. I want y'all to take it and multiply it for you, which comes back to me, kinda. Then also in verse 18, that was verse 2. Yeah, that was in verse 2. In verse 18, it says, the Lord said to Joshua, stretch out the javelin that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the javelin that was in his hand toward the city. This, kind of could be seen as like a staff javelin. As you know, if you've read the Bible, Moses carried a staff whenever he was leading the people. And whenever Moses stretched out his staff, it parted the Red Sea. And I believe, no, he had to drop it on the ground for it to turn into a snake. So, whenever he stretched out his spear, staff, javelin, similar metaphor. He parted the Red Sea and then destroyed Israel. This time, he had Joshua stretch out a javelin, and he's giving them Ai. Another city, destroying another people. Then I jumped down to verse 25, and it said, and all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, all the people of Ai. This sort of explains why the men said that, we can just send a small crew, should be able to wipe out the city and have no issues. Because it's a small city. And we just destroyed this really big city with all these people, and I don't see the reason why we would make them all get up and march again. A couple days after. So instead, he just sent a few of them and called it a day. Yeah, okay. And then in verse 28, it said, as it is, I highlighted again, or underlined again, kind of as it is to this day, because it was talking about how the Ai lays in a heap of ruins, and then it also talks about they took the body of the king of Ai, and they laid him in front of the gates of the city, and they raised a heap of stones over him, and it stands there to this day. Highlighted those because, again, it keeps talking about to this day. I don't know if that means up to today, but it at least meant up to the time this book was written. Which, I doubt it was written while they were conquering. It was probably written sometime thereafter. Which leads us to verse 30, which is where we will pick up for today. I'm probably going to read until I'm unsure yet. I haven't decided, but there we go. How do you get the bookmark off there? Might read the rest of chapter 8 and all of verse 9, or all of chapter 9, because the book that my Bible study class is in jumps all the way from 7 to, I want to say it's 14 or something like that. So I'm trying to read everything in between point A and point B to hopefully make it somewhere. See what happens. Alright, let's pick up in verse 30 and let's start some reading. At that time Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the people of Israel. As it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones, upon which no man has wielded an iron tool. And they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord, and sacrificed peace offerings. And there, in the presence of the people of Israel, he wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which he had written. And all of Israel, sojourner as well as native-born, with their elders and officers and their judges, stood on opposite sides of the ark before the Levitical priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, half of them in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the first to bless the people of Israel. And afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessing and the curse, according to all that is written in the book of the law. And there was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, and to the women and the little ones and sojourners who lived among them. I do want to underline in there whenever it talks about sojourners, because that shows that there were some that were not native Israelites, like Rahab, such as like Rahab. Sojourners who lived among them, like Rahab and her family. They would be sojourners because they were not native Israelites or the nationality of the Israelites, but they were people who were inside the camp of Israel. This also shows again kind of how strongly Joshua felt towards the way that the Lord had treated him and his people. What was I saying? Yes, this also shows again kind of how Joshua. Let me pause it real quick. Alright, I pulled out my booklet because I forgot my other Bible. It's in my truck. I wrote that the sojourners were the people like Rahab who weren't Israelite born. And it's verses 33 and 35. 8, 33, and 35. And then shows Joshua's respect for the Lord is from 30 to 35. 30 through 35. Alright. And then, and I say that because it says that, he carried it out, and not a word of all that Moses commanded Joshua did not, and there was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel. So in other words, he wanted to make sure that they fully understood the law, because, he didn't want any of the nonsense of, well, I didn't know that. Everybody knows that now. Even the people who weren't born into it. Even they know how all this works. Okay. Now that's all of that's all of chapter 8. That kind of finishes up chapter 8 and rolls us into chapter 9, which says the Gibeonite deception. And this is like 20-something page or 20-something verses long. Let's go ahead and start reading. It says in chapter 9, verse 1. As soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan and the hill country and the lowland all along the coast of the Great Sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. These weren't small people groups. These were people groups that had probably been there for hundreds of years. So they were probably also numbered in the thousands of peoples. But granted, the Israelites were somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of people. But it says they all banded together. I don't know how much you know about human history, but there's not a lot of times where people have grouped together. At least, especially not whenever they're not of the same nationality or same belief system or anything of that nature. These people were probably at odds and at war all the time. But because of the Israelites, they all banded together. Even though they had been in the land much longer. And that is 9:2. 9:2. I make that point because of the fact that the Israelites would have had a hard time either way, even if they didn't band together. And now they have all banded together to try and defeat the Israelites because they feel that they are a very large threat to them and their land. Alright, let's continue in verse 3. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they on their part acted with cunning and went and made ready provisions and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys, and wineskins worn out and torn, and mended with worn-out patches, sandals on their feet, and worn-out clothes. And all their provisions were dry and crumbling. And they went to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal, and said to him and the men of Israel, We have come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us. But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, Perhaps you live among us. Then how can we make a covenant with you? They said to Joshua, We are your servants. And Joshua said to them, Who are you, and where do you come from? They said to him, From a very distant country your servants have come, because the name of the Lord your God, for we have heard the report of him and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings, the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our country said to us, Take provisions and meet your hand for the journey, or take provisions in your hand for the journey, and go meet them where they say, and say to them, We are your servants. Come now and make a covenant with us. Here is our bread. It is still warm when we took it from our houses as our food for the journey on the day we set out to come to you. But now, behold, it is dry and crumbling. Another thing, not sure how much you've read your Bible, but God doesn't like liars. This is one big lying scheme. And don't lie. Talking to me too, but don't lie. It's way harder to sustain a lie than it is to just tell the truth the first time. And yes, it sucks. Yes, you will get in trouble. Yes, you will more than likely suffer the consequences of your actions. But you're going to do it anyway, even if you tell a lie. Though the reaction may be delayed, it will still come. And if not from your parents, from God. And trust me, you'd rather your parents' punishment. You can take a spanking over hell any day. Also, this was a serious part of, this was seriously important because if Joshua did make a covenant with these people, God had commanded them to absolutely not make a covenant with any of the people in the land. So if they did make a covenant with these Gibeonites, they would be kind of, again, going against God. I mean, we'll just have to kind of wait it out and see what they do, but that's why this is also kind of a big deal. And why, if their deception works, this could have gone very much worse for the people of Israel. Let me underline that. Make a covenant with us. And they said it once. Twice. And, but they said it at least twice within, like, the same conversation flow, based on the way this reads. I don't know how much you've ever had a conversation with somebody, but whenever somebody really starts to push a certain thing, at least for me, it makes me want to do it even less. So if you're like, hey man, I need like $20, and I'm like, okay, for what? And then instead of like giving me a straight answer, and you're just kind of like, oh well, I just need it for stuff. And I go, okay, well, what do you need? And you're like, I just need $20. I'm gonna start going, okay, what are you doing with $20? To where you won't tell me. It's kind of the same thing here. Because you want us to make a covenant with you, but why and where are you from? Because if they had made a covenant with the wrong people, then they could have absolutely avoided their covenant with God, and therefore they would have been led into destruction, kind of like you saw with AI a couple verses back in chapter 8. Or no, chapter 7, sorry. Yeah, chapter 7. Alright, let's continue on in verse 13. It says, these wineskins were new when we filled them, and behold, they have burst. And these garments and sandals of ours are worn out from the very long journey. So the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord. And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live, and the leaders in the congregation swore to them. Oops. This one doesn't really tell you the conditions of the covenant. When the spies of Israel made a covenant with Rahab to let her and her family live, they kind of gave them conditions, or gave her conditions to the covenant. So this one doesn't really tell you the conditions you were given, because like Rahab, she was given, oh, well, you can't tell on us, you can't, your people have to be in your house whenever we come in. Made a covenant with the people of the land. That is verse 15. Alrighty. Alright, let's pick back up in verse 16. At the end of 3 days after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors and that they lived among them. And the people of Israel set out and reached their cities on the 3rd day. Now the cities were Gibeon, Sephron, Beeroth, and Kiriath-Jearim. But the people of Israel did not attack them, because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by their Lord, the God of Israel. Then all the congregation murmured against the leaders. But all the leaders said to all the congregation, "We have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. This we will do to them. Let them live, lest wrath be upon us, because the oath we have sworn to them." So basically, their mistake made. Well, I say mistake. It wasn't really a mistake. God still let it happen, so it must have been a part of his plan. But their mistake made it to where Gibeon and all these places were basically untouchable now, because of the covenant that they made with them, allowing them to live and allowing, I guess, their people to live. Now we go to verse 21. And the leaders said to them, "Let them live." So they became cutters of wood and drawers of water for all the congregation, just as the leaders had said of them. They got servants out of it, though, so that was the nice part. So yeah, they get to live, but at the end of the day, it worked out, because now Israel has servants to do the manual labor for them. Yeah, you always kind of need those manual laborers. Is it perfect? No. Is it good? Yeah, it's pretty good. Now we go to verse 22. Joshua summoned them, and he said to them, "Why did you deceive us, saying we are very far from you, when you dwell among us? Now therefore you are cursed, and some of you shall never be anything but servants, cutters of wood and drawers of water for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "It was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you and did this thing. And now behold, we are in your hand. Whatever seems good and right in your sight to do to us, do it." So he did this to them and delivered them out of the hand of the people of Israel, and they did not kill them. But Joshua made them day cutters of wood and jars of water for the congregation and for all the altar of the Lord to this day in the place that he should choose. So again, Yes, he let them live. So, again, this shows another situation of God honoring a covenant. Joshua and the people made a covenant, and God let them do it, and God let them honor it, because what would he be if he didn't let them, if he didn't keep his promises, and he didn't let his people keep their promises? He still worked it out in his favor, though, because he got these people that are now completely indebted to Joshua and his people, so they can do the manual labor and that side of things for his people. Okay. That's where I'm done for tonight, as far as reading and all that goes. We'll go ahead and make it public tonight. It's the worst that happens. Nobody comes and watches. It's fine. I don't really expect you to. But if you do and you have anything, leave a comment. Be greatly appreciated. See y'all tomorrow.